Scrum Team Roles. Scrum simplifies projects down to only 3 roles. Remember, one of the benefits of this framework is keeping things simple. The 3 roles are the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, the Development Team. These 3 roles form the Scrum team. The Scrum Master. The Scrum Master's purpose is to understand the Scrum rules and practices, remove any impediments or blockers to the team delivering, and to help the team to understand how to self-organize and work in a Scrum manner. The Scrum Master facilitates for the Scrum team wherever it makes sense to do so. The Scrum Master is your go-to guy in terms of how the Scrum framework should operate, and this applies to anyone in the organization. The Scrum Master usually understands how to aid the product owner in maximizing return on investment from the business, and he helps the team to work together to be as productive as humanly possible and deliver a shippable increment of the product. The Product Owner. The product owner is responsible for creating requirements on behalf of the business. He prioritizes based on business needs and is responsible for managing the product backlog, which is the list of all the features that the business requires in the finished product. The product owner is responsible for making decisions that maximize return on investment and for making priority calls or trade-offs to maximize the product's value. The Development Team. The team are responsible for building a potentially shippable product increment in each sprint. Scrum is clear that there are only three roles in the Scrum team. It does not go into the specifics of all of the different possible knowledge experts within the development team because the idea is that if push came to shove, team members would collaborate to perform tasks outside of their role to deliver the product. The development team are self-organizing and collaborative, as well as skilled in whatever is needed to develop the project. For example, in a typical technical project, you might have developers, graphic designers, and user experience specialists working together in a sprint to create a product increment. One key difference between Scrum and many other frameworks is that the development team are explicitly experts in their field as opposed to controlled resources. They look to the Scrum Master for coaching, guidance, and the removal of impediments. They look to the product owner for clear requirements, prioritization, and trade-off calls. Development team size. One important fact that is often overlooked is the optimum size of the team. Scrum teams are usually small because it helps them to be more cohesive and communicate efficiently. The optimum size is between 3 and 9. This is not a number that just materialized over a chat or in the local bar. It is based on experience of thought leaders who have been doing team-based work for years. From my experience, having tried and tested these team sizes, I can stand by them as numbers that create highly productive teams. However, as you know, there is no substitute for common sense in these cases.
So the first one is the Scrum team itself. So what I have highlighted at the beginning here is just to make sure that you understand that the Scrum team actually consists of the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. So despite the fact that the development team is a team, it is within the Scrum team. The development team exists within the Scrum team. And that is important because a lot of times in the video that I've put together and in the Scrum guide, teams are mentioned. But it is really important to remember the distinction between the Scrum team and the development team. And this is one of those things that comes up in the certification exam. And it is also something that is often confused in industry. So it's something that I really want you to remember. The Scrum team is a combination of the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. And there are certain things that the Scrum Master needs to do to help facilitate the whole Scrum team. But then the development team are the people responsible for building the shippable increment of the product, or for building a piece of the product, in other words. And they have their own needs. Obviously, there are specific impediments that come up during the course of a project. The Scrum Master will work with the development team to solve them. So I'm just highlighting the two teams. Next, drawing attention to the fact that in this model, there is a development team and they are part of the Scrum team. The fact is, there are explicitly 3 roles. And the thing that I want you to remember about this is that this is specifically designed by the creators of Scrum to optimize flexibility, creativity, and productivity. So, in other words, there is a reason why the Scrum team has been designed this way. It has been designed without stakeholders, designed without other members of the organization, but it has been designed with the key people necessary to deliver a working increment of a product and to collaborate, really, in order to do that. The product owner. Now, the product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product and the work of the development team. So this is one of those things that I know came up in one of the exams that I sat. So I'm really drawing attention to the definition of things here. So you can see in the Scrum Guide the way it's defined, and because a lot of the time the questions that come up in the exam are likely to be based around what a product owner is responsible for and isn't responsible for or accountable for. So just to get that straight, if you are responsible for something, it means that you are actually the doer. You are actually the person that does the work. That somebody is going to come to you and say, have you done it? And why is that done incorrectly? Those are 2 things someone could ask you if you're responsible, if you're the doer. However, in terms of being accountable, it may be that someone else does the work, but that you are someone who either instructs them or has delegated that task. But you are still accountable, as in someone could still come to you and ask you in that situation why something was not done. However, they'd be talking about something you've instructed someone else to do or asked someone else to do. So that's something to look out for in terms of exams. A product owner is the sole person responsible for managing a product backlog. So there it is, that word responsible. A lot of times in industry, I've seen situations where the product owner hasn't taken responsibility or doesn't realize that they are the only person responsible for managing the product backlog. So sometimes the Scrum Master has to get involved here just to coach them, just so that they understand. So that's why I've highlighted that. Ordering the items in the product backlog to best achieve goals and missions is one of the things that managing the backlog includes, and therefore the product owner is responsible for. And optimizing the value of the work done by the development team and how they perform is another one, basically. And optimizing the value of the work the development team performs is another one. So the product owner is consistently thinking about what are the best things the development team could work on to get the most value out of them. This is something they consistently think about. I just thought I'd highlight these 2 because I know that they have come up in past exams. And they are examples of the kind of things that come up in the exam. I mean, potentially anything can come up in the exam, but I'm highlighting examples so that you can see the kind of questions that could be asked. For the product owner to succeed, the entire organization must respect his or her decisions. I've highlighted this because a lot of times, one of the key challenges, and if you're a Scrum Master, I'd ask you to pay really close attention to this one. A lot of times, the difficulty we have is that in the real world, if I'm really honest, in a lot of situations, the product owner's line manager or the as seniors often do not respect the product owner's decisions, or they do respect the product owner's decisions, but because of their status, they actually have a right to overrule the product owner. So it is just something to be aware of, which is that in the reality of life, sometimes, because of the nature of an organization, it is difficult, and I really sympathize with product owners, but it is difficult to fully carry out your role, as the Scrum Guide says. So this is something to be aware of in everyday life. And you know, there are various techniques for dealing with that. Some of them revolve around making your senior stakeholders aware of how you can actually add value for them. And you can take it into account when speaking to the whole organization. You can still prioritize when necessary and bear in mind all of their opinions as opposed to one person's opinion. But you can also add value for them by doing your role and allowing them to do their role. So in some ways, you take the weight off their shoulders. You can also use a lot of the information you get from the team to make the right decisions because you're a lot closer to them than the stakeholders. The next part is highlighting the fact that incremental deliveries of done product ensure a potentially useful version of working product is always available. So what is meant here is that the very nature of Scrum lends itself to the fact that a piece of a working product is delivered each sprint. And all this is saying is the fact that the piece of the product is done according to the team's definition. This is really key here, guys. It really is a key thing within Scrum. To make sure that your definition of done is sufficient, that you're satisfied that as a Scrum team, the output of each sprint is going to be a useful increment of the working product. So really work on this. Really work on your definition of done. And you need to work on it to make sure that it incorporates essentially the rules that you are going to live by as a team. And these can be revised each sprint, but they really need to be worked on up front. And that's to make sure that whatever you come up with at the end of a sprint, as long as it adheres to your rules, is considered a shippable increment. As I've said before, there are many ways to come up with a definition of done. It may be that a tester needs to ensure that the product is correctly tested and declared as a high quality product before it's done. The designers are happy that it meets all of their design standards. Might be another rule in a definition of done. And basically putting together this list of things that you will adhere to and work towards and can adapt as the list goes on is really key. So I wanted to draw your attention to that. The development team. So a development team consists of professionals who do the work of delivering a potentially releasable increment. So what I'm drawing attention to here is really just the definition of what the development team does. And again, to the fact that, as you've seen me mention many times, the done increment really is key. The fact that the increment is done is where the power really is in Scrum. Because at the end of a sprint, you have some certainty that you have accomplished something. That is really of value to the users and the business, the fact that you've really delivered an increment of a product that is usable by them. So Scrum recognizes no titles for the development team members other than developer, regardless of the work being performed by the person, and there are no exceptions to this rule. I thought I'd highlight that because, first of all, I want to draw your attention to what Ted was saying in the video, which is that there are 3 and only 3 roles in Scrum, and one of them is the development team. So it doesn't matter whether you've got designers, developers, testers. I mean, even though designers are called designers, they are helping to develop an increment of the product, and hence they develop the product. So in that sense, they're part of the development team. I've highlighted this just to really drive home the fact that we're one team as a Scrum team. You know, as a Scrum Master, Product Owner and Development team, we are one team. And within the development team, everybody is one team. So the designers, the testers, the developers, etc. Whichever industry you're in, it doesn't have to be software. But if people are working together to deliver a product, they need to be one team in Scrum. Because part of the value and the power it brings is the delivery and the transparency between those team members. It's going to make that product stronger and ensure you a delivery you can be confident in and has value. The Scrum Master. So here I'm drawing attention to some of the things that the Scrum Master is responsible for. The first one is just a definition which comes from the video. The Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring Scrum is understood and enacted. I've seen a question on this in the open assessment. That's the scrum.org open assessment, which is a practice exam that is going to give you a lot of confidence. I've seen some questions around this, some tricky little questions really. In terms of meetings and things that the Scrum Master needs, does or doesn't need to do, or meetings that the Scrum Master needs to attend. And so a lot of times in Scrum, you'll find that the Scrum Master is there to facilitate and to make sure that Scrum is understood and enacted. But sometimes the Scrum Master does not need to be present with the team in order to make sure these things happen. He or she may just need to set up a meeting, or he or she may need to be present a lot of times, and I recommend you are present in nearly every situation. But there are also some situations where you don't need to be present. Scrum Masters do this by triggering the team to self-organize. So that's why I'm going through this guide, just to make sure that you really understand the rules, especially if you're a Scrum Master, but not limited to. And the Scrum Master is a servant leader. Servant leadership is a really important concept. The idea is that by serving the team, you also lead the team. If you can think about the times you've had a manager who has really helped you to get to the next level, or has really answered questions for you, I'm sure this will make a lot of sense. You know, by really helping a team to succeed, you are really helping them to get to the next level, but you're still a leader. It does not stop you being a leader. There's no weakness in the term here. As you can see, the leader part is there, and the servant part is also there. So they coexist happily together. The Scrum Master is leading through example, through influence, through making the whole team aware of the Scrum framework and rules. There's a strong sense of leadership there. Facilitating events as required or as needed. This is another thing that Scrum Master does. So I don't really need to go into too much detail about that, but the word facilitating or facilitator often comes up in Scrum, and that's something to be aware of. Removing impediments. That is the key thing a Scrum Master does by removing any of the blockers, making sure the team can work effectively, leading and coaching the organization in Scrum adoption. So I have highlighted that one because one thing that often gets missed, I think, is the fact that a Scrum Master actually has the authority to coach anyone in the organization and to lead. So those are two very important things within an organization. And the Scrum Master should really be respected for that, and be respected enough and empowered enough to go into an organization and be the authority on Scrum. And be able to say, listen, you need to give the team space, or in some situations that I've had a really good relationship with senior stakeholders and had to say, listen, if you have any questions, direct them through this person. Sometimes that person would be me, sometimes that person would be the product owner. And we don't want to stop stakeholders collaborating with the team. But when questions become excessive, that's an example of where you sometimes need to coach people in the organization to understand that after a certain point, you are actually reducing the productivity of the team if you communicate with them too much. Okay, so that ends this section. I hope it has been helpful for you. Thanks for your time, and I'll speak to you in the next section.